Hello. My name is Niall Mitchell. My parents read my journal. Not behind my back. Not quietly. They stood in front of our family, glass of wine in hand, and recited it like it was a bedtime story. They laughed at my trauma. My brother sent pieces of it to my ex. My mother forwarded it in an email. Labeled it, just so you know. But what they didn't know was that one name inside that journal belonged to a federally protected witness. What they didn't expect was the knock at the door, the agents, the silence that followed. So tell me, what would you do if your own family turned your secrets into entertainment? And would you still be the villain for finally saying, enough? When I drove back into Fredericksburg that Friday morning, the air smelled the same as it had when I was 17. Wet pavement, magnolia blooms, and cut grass. The old courthouse clock still chimed at the wrong hour, and the same antique shop sat across from the gas station, its windows cluttered with dusty Americana. Nothing in that town changed. Not really. And I suppose that's what made my stomach twist as I turned onto Oak Hill Road. Dad's birthday banner hung crooked across the porch, the same faded blue from last year. My mother had probably saved it, ironed it, and reused it, just like she did everything that carried sentimental value. The house itself looked proud, symmetrical, polished to the point of sterility. I parked at the curb and sat in the car a moment longer than I needed to, counting my breaths. Inside, the smell of lemon polish hit first, then the faint trace of my mother's perfume, something floral and sharp. Niall, she called from the kitchen, her voice bright, rehearsed. You made it. I told your father you'd come early. She appeared, hands on her hips, gold bracelets clinking. Vera Mitchell was 65 going on 40 and carried herself like the mayor's wife. Her eyes swept over me, assessing everything from my shoes to the shape of my hair. You look tired. Are you eating enough? I'm fine, Mom. I smiled thinly. Where's Dad? Out back. He's trimming the hedge again. Won't let me hire anyone. He thinks it keeps him young. She waved toward the yard as though the act itself deserved applause. Your brother's on his way. Isolde's already here. Try not to start one of your debates today, okay? It's his big birthday. I bit back the automatic reply. Sure, Mom. I'll try not to ruin another family function by existing differently. Instead, I nodded and headed for the back door. Dad was where she said, focused on shaping a boxwood shrub into something geometrical. Hey, sweetheart, he said without turning around. Glad you made it. His voice had the same calm warmth that had carried me through childhood, but his eyes never left the clippers. That was Dad, present in body, distant in spirit. Happy birthday, I said. He nodded, and I watched his hand tremble slightly with age. The afternoon filled with familiar motions, setting the table, arranging flowers, checking the weather for the outdoor dinner. Isolde swept in wearing white linen, smelling expensive, her tone sugar-coated but edged. Look who decided to come home, working on another top-secret government thing. She didn't wait for an answer. That was her way of asking and dismissing in one breath. Callan arrived next, all jokes and charm, hugging Mom too long and patting me on the shoulder like a coworker. We went through the choreography of reunion, polite laughter, small talk, the constant hum of competition beneath every word. While setting glasses, I noticed my suitcase sitting by the stairs. Mom must have carried it up for me. Thanks for moving that, I said. She smiled vaguely. Oh, I just put it in your old room. The one you always locked when you were little. Remember how you used to hide in there with those silly notebooks? Something in me stiffened. I hadn't thought about those notebooks in years. That night, after dinner prep was done and everyone drifted into their own corners, I sat on the edge of the bed in that same room. The wallpaper was gone, replaced by neutral beige, but the window still squeaked when opened. I slid my journal out of my work bag, ran my fingers over the leather cover, then locked it inside my suitcase. Old habits die hard. When I was 12, I kept my first real journal, a spiral notebook covered in stickers. I wrote about everything. The smell of rain, the silence at dinner, the way Mom's praise always came with a hidden clause. One winter night, she found it. I can still see the living room fireplace glowing orange, my notebook open on her lap. You wrote this about me, she demanded, flipping pages like evidence in a trial. You think I don't love you? You think you're smarter than everyone? I tried to grab it back. It's private. Her face tightened. Nothing in this house is private. She stood, tossed the book into the fire, and crossed her arms as the paper curled. Stop wasting your time on feelings. No one cares what you think, Niall. That smell, ink, smoke, and shame stay with me longer than the words. I told myself I'd never write again. But years later, working in WITSEC, surrounded by secrets that ate at people from the inside, I learned that writing kept me sane. By the time evening settled over the house, the backyard was strung with lights. Laughter and country music spilled from the speakers. Guests arrived with bottles of wine and store-bought desserts. Mom's smile gleamed brighter than the lanterns. I stayed near the edge of the crowd, polite but detached. The noise blurred into a steady hum until a ripple of laughter cut through it. Sharp, familiar. My name. She's right here, someone said. Read that part again. The sound came from the patio. I stepped closer, weaving through bodies until I saw her, Mom, standing beneath the string lights, my journal open in her hands. And here, she said, lifting her glass for emphasis, our little spy writes, sometimes silence is louder than truth. Isn't that poetic? The group laughed. Isolde smirked, arms folded. Callan had his phone out, recording something. My body went cold. Mom, I said, stepping forward, trying to keep my voice steady. Where did you get that? Oh, sweetie, relax. Everyone's just fascinated by how creative you are. You should hear them. That's not for anyone to read. She rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. It's a journal, not a government file. A few guests chuckled. Someone murmured. Guess she takes after her mother. The noise collapsed around me, muffled. Every heartbeat sounded like a drum in my ears. I could see Callan's reflection in the sliding glass door, grinning. I saw Isolde whisper something to a friend and laugh. Give it back, I said quietly. Niall, it's fine. Mom flipped another page, laughing. Oh, listen to this part. She actually writes about feeling invisible. Isn't that tragic? It was the same tone she'd used when I was 12, amused, superior, and utterly certain of her right to humiliate. I turned away before I could see more. Each step up the stairs felt like walking underwater. In the hallway mirror, my face looked calm, almost attached, but my hands trembled. Inside the room, I locked the door and sat on the bed. The music below drifted through the floorboards, dull and distant. My phone buzzed with messages, colleagues, reminders, but I ignored them. I stared at the suitcase. The lock was open now, zipper half undone. She must have found the key earlier, tucked under the lining. It's happening again, I whispered. I picked up my phone, thumb hovering over the emergency alert app. A direct line to DHS for compromised materials. I imagined the consequences, the flashing lights, the explanations. My family would never understand. They'd call it betrayal. I dropped the phone beside me and leaned forward, elbows on knees. They never learn, I said to the empty room. Or maybe they never cared. Outside, laughter continued, rising and falling like waves. Somewhere in that noise, my mother's voice carried, confident and clear, performing her favorite story, the one where she's always right. I sat there until the music faded, until the lights outside dimmed, and until the last guest's car pulled away. Then I lay back, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles. Tomorrow I decide what to do. Tonight, I just let the silence swallow me whole. And yet, the next morning, she smiled at me over breakfast like nothing had happened. The same grin she used on neighbors, church friends, and charity donors. That trained hospitality, polished to the point of cruelty. The sun had barely cleared the tree line when I stepped into the kitchen. My journal was waiting for me on the counter, closed, perfectly aligned with the edge, like a napkin folded for brunch service. No note, no apology, just placed there like a returned casserole dish. Mom stood at the stove, humming along to a soft jazz station, flipping eggs with one hand and texting with the other. The scent of rosemary and burnt toast hung in the air. She didn't look up. Morning, sweetheart, she said. I didn't answer. My eyes stayed locked on the journal. The same one she'd humiliated me with less than 12 hours earlier. It looked untouched, but I knew better. The damage wasn't in the pages. It was in the smirks, the laughter, the glances people gave me after. Those kinds of bruises don't show up on paper. Isolde sat at the island bar in her perfect posture, scrolling through her phone like she hadn't just dissected my psyche in front of a dozen strangers the night before. She wore a cream sweater, no makeup, and the expression of someone confident she was both right and justified. She sipped her coffee, then looked at me. Some of that stuff you wrote? Honestly, I diagnose you myself. I met her eyes. It wasn't meant for you. She shrugged, still scrolling. Then maybe don't leave it lying around. Don't pretend you accidentally found it. Isolde let out a soft laugh. Relax now. It's not that deep. Mom turned, placing a plate of eggs and toast in front of me like we were acting out some nostalgic scene from a sitcom. Let's not start the day with tension, she said, her tone sugary. It's your father's weekend, after all. Right, I murmured, picking up the journal and tucking it under my arm. Wouldn't want to ruin the performance. As I walked out, Callan entered through the back door with a donut in his mouth and zero awareness. He glanced at us, grinned, and said, Am I late to the latest episode of the Nile show? They all laughed. Even Dad, sitting silently at the kitchen table, gave a half smile. It wasn't that they didn't believe they'd done something wrong. It was that they believed I shouldn't care. I headed upstairs, placed the journal back in my suitcase, and locked it again. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting the weight of their indifference settle on my shoulders. I used to think silence was safety. Now I saw it for what it was, permission. Years earlier, when I was 17 and Isolde was applying to med school, I wrote a personal essay for English class. It was raw, unfiltered. I titled it, Living with Loud Walls, about surviving in a house that looked like success but whispered judgment in every hallway. I never submitted it. I tucked it into the back of my binder and forgot about it. Until the night Mom called me downstairs, beaming, and said, Isolde just got a scholarship. Full ride. They said her essay was powerful. So proud. I congratulated her. She hugged me and whispered, Some of your lines were too good to waste. I stood frozen. Later that night, I opened my binder. The essay was gone. I never confronted her. What would have been the point? Everyone already believed she was the golden child, the compassionate one. No one would have believed I wrote it first. That's when I learned the world rewards polish, not honesty. Back in the present, the house filled with sounds of brunch prep. More guests arrived. Neighbors, church friends, a retired judge and his wife. The smell of baked ham and cinnamon rolls spread through the halls. The kind of scene people post on Facebook with captions like, Family is everything. I sat in the corner of a sunroom, pretending to read. A few guests passed by, nodding, offering polite smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Then I heard her. Isolde. Always the loudest when it suited her. You know, Nile has always been creative, she said, laughing. She once wrote that the walls of his house had teeth. More laughter followed. She's so internal, Isolde added, in that voice she used on patients. Probably why she never married. So much going on up here. She tapped her temple. I looked up in time to see a woman I didn't recognize glance at me, then quickly look away. It wasn't just mockery, it was exposure. Intimacy weaponized. I stayed seated, not because I was frozen, but because standing up would have made it real. And I wasn't going to give them that. They'd already taken enough. I made it through the rest of brunch in a fog. Polite nods. Distant smiles. At some point, someone asked me how work was going. I answered with a wordless fine, and that was enough for them. When the last guest left, I climbed the stairs, closed my door, and turned the lock. The hum of voices below faded behind the thick walls. I opened my suitcase, pulled out the journal again, and set it on the nightstand. I opened the emergency alert app on my phone, slid the icon to arm but didn't press send. Not yet. Instead, I opened to a page about my father. When I wrote a year ago, I wonder if he remembers the fire, the crackle, the silence. She burned it, and he didn't flinch. He'd been there when Mom destroyed my first journal. He'd been sitting in his recliner, reading the paper. He didn't say a word. He hadn't spoken up since, either. So why did some part of me still think he might? I sat in that room as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the floor. The cicadas outside buzzed louder than the voices in my head. I stared at the page, willing it to give me answers. But all it gave me was the truth. Silence, when chosen by others, is another kind of violence. By mid-afternoon, the house had gone quiet again. The plates from brunch were stacked in the sink, most guests had trickled out, and the cicadas had resumed their slow, grating hum beyond the screened porch. I'd retreated there with a book I didn't intend to read, only to sit and breathe in something close to stillness. Callan appeared with a mug in each hand, wearing that easy grin of his, the one he used when he wanted you to believe he cared, or at least wasn't the enemy. "You still drink black, right?" he asked, offering the mug like a peace treaty. I nodded and took it, though the bitterness hit my tongue like chalk. He sat across from me, leaned back, and let out a long, contented sigh. "Man, this place hasn't changed, huh? Same porch swing, same bugs, same mom, driving everyone insane." I half smiled. Some things never evolve. He laughed like I'd said something clever, and for a moment, I almost relaxed. He wasn't like Isolde, not sharp and surgical with her words. Callan always managed to skate over the tension, lightening a room just before it burned. "I don't always get you," he said, sipping, "but I respect what you do. I mean, you're the brain in the family. I'm just the salesman." I raised an eyebrow. "Marketing. That's not nothing." "Still," he shrugged, "you're out there doing, what, federal stuff. You're like a real-life Jason Bourne with a desk job." I chuckled despite myself. "It's not that dramatic." He grinned wider. "Come on, give me something. Just one secret." I shook my head. "You know I can't. And you know that journal is off limits." Callan placed his mug down, palms raised. "Hey, I hear you." "I didn't touch it. Who wants to read that heavy stuff anyway?" I nodded, not quite believing him, but wanting to. Wanting, just once, to believe someone in this family could take me at my word and leave well enough alone. Later, back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the journal inside my open suitcase. I hadn't locked it this time. Maybe part of me still wanted to test them. Or maybe I'd been stupid enough to think we'd turned a corner. I was brushing my hair when my phone buzzed. A message from a name I hadn't seen in 2 years. "So you still think I never loved you? Glad to know you're still journaling your delusions." Attached a photo. A scan of a page from my journal, one I'd written during the worst month of my engagement, when I'd started to suspect he wasn't just working late every night. I dropped the phone. My skin flushed, not with heat, but with something colder, something that made it hard to move. That entry, it had never left my journal. Not in print, not in voice. No backups, no leaks. Except for the unlocked suitcase. I stood across the room and opened it fully. Pages untouched. No signs of a break-in. Just that same quiet, mocking stillness. Callan had been near it. He'd been here in this room, just that morning, joking about coffee and secrets and how he respected me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm into his room and shove the phone in his face and ask, why? But instead I sat, and I let the ache settle deep, because it wasn't just the betrayal, it was the confirmation that trust was still a currency I couldn't spend in this house. The evening moved on. By 6, the grill was lit again, and guests had returned for the real party, as Mom called it. I stayed upstairs, leaning against the hallway railing, hidden behind the half-closed door, watching the slow unraveling of what little remained of my privacy. I heard Gideon's voice first, loud and amused. "You wouldn't believe what she wrote. Reads like a political thriller. Honestly, someone should publish it." A woman's voice, one of the neighbors, laughed. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," he said. "There's a bit about a classified operation, coded names, mental profiles, and some seriously disturbing personal stuff." Leora chimed in, giggling. "I made a copy. Want to borrow it?" The hallway spun slightly under my feet. I leaned into the wall. My stomach twisted not from embarrassment, but from something colder, the realization that they weren't just mocking me, they were turning my pain into dinner conversation. Downstairs, laughter grew. More voices joined. More stories passed around like hors d'oeuvres. I didn't go down. I didn't speak. I returned to my room, closed the door, gently locked it, and knelt beside my suitcase. I opened the journal, flipped through its pages, and landed on the last one. I ripped it out carefully, as if it were something sacred. Then I took a pen and rewrote one sentence. This is no longer a record. It's a receipt. I took a photo of the page and uploaded it to my WitSec encrypted case file, tagging it under personal breach, non-permissive exposure. There was no revenge in the act. No anger. Just documentation. They thought this was over. They thought I'd take it like I always had. But they triggered something they didn't even realize they'd been standing on for years. And it was already too late to stop what was coming. The morning after the whispering and the laughter, the house felt too still, like the calm before a thunderstorm. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my journal open in someone else's hands, heard the echo of their voices turning my private words into family entertainment. I sat up in bed as the first light filtered through the blinds. The clock read 6:37. Downstairs, faint noises, pots clinking, coffee brewing, told me Mom was awake. The air smelled of burnt toast and something lemony, like cleaning spray. I rubbed my eyes and looked toward my suitcase, still half open on the floor. The journal lay on top, face down, as though it had been left in shame. I pulled it into my lap. I wasn't sure why. Maybe because, despite everything, I needed to see my own handwriting again, proof that I still owned something no one else could twist. I started flipping through the pages slowly, scanning for damage, fingerprints, coffee stains, anything. Then my eyes froze on one particular line, one name that shouldn't have been there. Arlo T. The word stared back at me like a warning sign I'd ignored. At first, I couldn't remember writing it. Then it clicked. It wasn't personal, it was work. A note from months ago, when I'd been drafting psychological profiles for witness protection candidates. Arlo T. wasn't even a real name. It was a placeholder, a pseudonym assigned to one of our highest-risk protected witnesses in a federal corruption case. I felt my throat tighten. That entry wasn't supposed to exist anywhere outside the encrypted system. Certainly not on paper. I turned the page, scanning my handwriting, descriptions of behavior, fragments of confidential memory from interviews, things I wasn't supposed to take home. I whispered, "Oh no," and the sound barely left my lips. Suddenly, the image of Mom reading it aloud flashed in my mind, her voice playful, teasing. "Arlo T, whoever that is," she'd said, laughing. Guests had laughed too. A few had even asked questions. I hadn't thought anything of it then, too mortified to process. But now, my chest hollowed out as realization spread. Someone else might have heard that name, someone who understood what it meant. My fingers trembled as I reached for my secure tablet. The screen glowed blue as I entered my passcode, heart pounding against my ribs. I searched the WitSec files, scrolling until I found the reference. Arlo T. Active witness, placed under relocation 6 months prior. Case pending. Identity fully sealed. The page blurred. I checked timestamps, cross-references, anything to prove I hadn't just broken a federal confidentiality law by accident. But the proof was staring at me. It felt like my body split in two, the federal analyst who lived by rules, and the daughter who'd lost control of her own household. I typed a few quick lines into the incident log, then deleted them just as fast. Reporting it meant starting an investigation. An investigation meant questions about where, how, and by whom the leak had occurred. That would lead straight back here, to Mom's house, to my family, to the people who'd already turned my private world into their plaything. A message alert flashed across the tablet. Confidential alert. Verify document access. Confirm whether material has remained secured. My hand went cold around the stylus. I couldn't confirm that. I couldn't even pretend to. I thought about last night's guests. Mrs. Landry had been there. Neighbor, widow of a retired federal agent. She'd stood near the patio door while Mom read the journal. I remembered her face, the way her eyes had lingered on that one name. She hadn't laughed. She'd gone quiet. And later, I'd seen her outside, speaking softly on the phone, her expression grave. I'd brushed it off then, assuming she was calling a friend. Now, that memory lodged like a shard of glass. If she recognized the name, she might have reported it already. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs grew louder, the tick of the old wall clock following like a metronome for panic. I stood up, pacing the room. I could hear my family's voices faintly drifting from below, Mom's bright chatter, Dad's baritone hum, Callan laughing at something trivial. Normal, safe sounds. The kind of background noise that used to soothe me, Now it made my skin crawl. They had no idea what they'd done. If this spiraled, if anyone connected that journal to me, it wouldn't just be embarrassing. It would be criminal. And the worst part was, I couldn't even explain it to them. I sat back down, gripping the tablet. My thumb hovered over the report breach button. I should have pressed it, but pressing it meant detonating a bomb inside my own life. Instead, I opened the memo app and started typing a message to my supervisor. Subject: potential exposure, non-secure environment. I wrote 3 lines. I may have inadvertently compromised sensitive material. I'm not sure yet who accessed it. Please advise on containment protocol. My fingers stopped. I couldn't hit send. What would I even say if they called? My family read it. My mother. My sister. My brother. They thought it was entertainment. I deleted the message. I opened the voice recorder instead and pressed record. My voice sounded detached, almost mechanical. If this spirals, I want it recorded that I knew. That I froze. That I was too afraid of becoming the story. I saved the file, encrypted it, and labeled it private statement 061225. The sound of my own breathing filled the silence. For a moment, I caught my reflection in the mirror across the room, eyes sunken, hair loose, face pale. I barely recognized myself. They don't understand, I whispered. And if I don't stop this, they're not the only ones who'll pay. I closed the tablet, slid it under my pillow, and turned toward the window. Outside, the sun had risen higher, painting the tops of the maple trees gold. From below came laughter, Mom's voice again, light and easy, talking to someone on the porch. Normalcy. Always her shield, but something had shifted inside me. A quiet, irreversible shift from fear to calculation. If the law came knocking, I wasn't going to take the fall for their ignorance. I reached for the journal one last time, flipped it open, and stared at that name. Arlo T. My handwriting neat, precise, damning. Then I tore the page out, folded it twice, and slipped it into my pocket. By late afternoon, the sun had dipped just enough for shadows to stretch long across the floorboards. The tension in my chest hadn't eased since that morning when I discovered how badly things had spiraled. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't showered. I'd sat with that journal, that damn journal, like it was a ticking device and no one else in the house could hear it hum. I waited until the house quieted. Most guests had left after lunch. Amira was upstairs playing with her tablet, and the grown-ups were all clustered in the den with drinks, as if the past 48 hours hadn't been a slow-motion explosion. I walked down the stairs, careful and slow. No one looked up at first. Callan was leaning back in Dad's recliner, beer in hand. Gideon sat on the edge of the couch, scrolling his phone, one foot bouncing. Isolde and Leora whispered in the corner while Mom arranged a platter of sliced fruit no one had asked for. Dad stared at the muted television, remote in hand, volume untouched. "Can I speak to everyone for a minute?" I said. My voice didn't crack, but it was quieter than I wanted. Gideon looked up, then grinned like I just walked into a family game night. "Sure thing. What are we doing, group therapy?" Vera gave him a sharp glance. Gideon. Then to me. "Of course, sweetie. But make it quick. Your father wants to catch the 6 o'clock news." I stood in the center of the room, feet planted. My palms were sweating. I'd rehearsed the words upstairs like a closing argument. I looked at each of them. "You've breached federal confidentiality," I began. Gideon laughed, loud and dismissive. "Wait, what?" I didn't smile. "By copying, distributing, and discussing the contents of my journal, which contains material related to my classified work, you've crossed a line. I warned you. This isn't just family drama anymore. This is legal." Mom turned from the table. "Oh, Niall. Come on. Don't be ridiculous. You write about your feelings, not nuclear codes." I swallowed hard. There are details and they're tied to an active protected witness. A name. That name should never have left a secure system, let alone been shared like party gossip. Isolde rolled her eyes. "You're always so dramatic. You act like you're the only one in the world who's ever had a bad childhood or a demanding job." "You don't understand the stakes," I said. "But ignorance isn't a defense." Gideon raised a hand like he was playing teacher's pet. "Let me just get this straight. You think I'm going to get arrested because I emailed your whiny diary to a couple of my coworkers?" You emailed it? I asked, pulse quickening. He grinned. What? It was a good read. Honestly, one of the guys thought it might be fake, too on the nose. So I passed it along to our in-house analyst. My jaw clenched. Gideon, do you even know what you've done? Mom interrupted, voice shrill. Enough. This is absurd. You want your brother-in-law to lose his job because he read something you left lying around. You want us arrested? Isolde snapped. For caring enough to finally try and understand what's going on in that twisted little head of yours. Don't twist this, I said louder now. You didn't care. You mocked. You shared things that weren't yours. And now, someone outside this house has information that was supposed to remain classified. This isn't about my feelings. It's about your choices. Vera folded her arms. You won't follow through. Your family. I didn't respond. I just looked at each of them. Dad still hadn't said a word. I turned and walked out, leaving their voices colliding in the background, every word another nail. Back upstairs, I closed my door, locked it, sat down at my desk and pulled out my phone. I opened the recording app, took a deep breath, and pressed record. This is Niall Mitchell, I said, voice steady now. It's 6:12 p.m. on June 12th. I am documenting, in full, the individuals who have now had access to and distributed classified material via my personal journal. Present at the time of unauthorized distribution were Vera Mitchell, Ellis Mitchell, Callan Mitchell, Isolde Mitchell, Leora Mitchell, and Gideon West. As of this afternoon, Gideon West confirmed he shared material via email with colleagues, including his firm's internal analyst. I have reason to believe this information may have reached outside parties connected to the federal court system. I paused, swallowed, continued. This is not a matter of emotion. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a violation of federal law. I did not give consent. I issued a verbal warning. It was ignored. This file is being stored in a secure location. If anything happens, this is my record. I stopped the recording and saved the file. Then I moved it to my WITSEC backup. Once done, I set the phone down and placed it beside the panic device. And for the first time, my hands didn't shake. They thought I wouldn't act, that I'd stay quiet, like I always had. But silence had never protected me. It had only bought them more time to do harm. This time, they'd have to answer for it. After recording the file, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the vanity mirror. My face was drawn, eyes rimmed in fatigue, but the tremble that had haunted my hands for the past day was gone. I wasn't calm. This wasn't calm. It was clarity, a sharp, cold edge of it, the kind that comes right before a clean cut. Downstairs, they were setting the table. Again, the same table where they'd once held hands and prayed before dinner, where we celebrated birthdays, where I used to sit with coloring books while Dad graded tests. Now, it was just the backdrop for whatever Vera thought made the family look the most put together. I heard Callan laugh from the living room. I couldn't hear the joke, but it was the kind of laugh he used when he wanted everyone to forget there was tension in the air. I stood, straightened my shoulders, and headed down, determined to keep my voice steady, my expression unreadable. The kitchen was too bright. Vera had opened the curtains wide, letting the orange light spill across the countertops. She was arranging a fruit tray with manicured precision when she glanced up. "Oh, Niall," she said. "Perfect timing. Can you pass the salt?" That's what she said. Pass the salt. I blinked at her. The woman who'd read my journal aloud, who'd let others laugh at my pain, who'd ignored every warning I'd issued. And now she wanted salt. Like this was a normal evening. Like we weren't sitting on a minefield she helped plant. I didn't answer. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A private alert. I stepped aside and pulled out the device, unlocking the secure screen. The notification was red. Alert. PDF file. Niall's Mind Journal, just so you know .pdf, has been accessed from multiple external accounts. Attachment shared via family thread forwarded outside network. I stared at the message, letting the blood drain from my face. I opened the email thread. There it was. A message from my mother, sent just an hour ago. Subject, just so you know, smiley face. Body, some of you were curious. Here's what she's been writing. I think it'll explain a lot. Attachment, Niall's Mind Journal, just so you know .pdf. She'd attached the full scan, all 96 pages, my notes, my assessments, the protected name, my fears, my process, all of it. The document wasn't just breached, it was distributed. I looked up. Vera was still arranging pineapple slices. Everyone else was chatting, pouring wine, preparing for whatever image they thought they needed to perform next. No one noticed the shift in my breathing. No one saw the weight that had just settled on my chest. I walked upstairs. Quiet. Controlled. When I got back to my room, I didn't hesitate. I opened the DHS Secure Response app. The red button glowed at the center of the screen. My thumb hovered. "This will ruin them," I whispered. "It might ruin me, but if I let this go, I become them." I tapped the screen. Report acknowledged. Response in progress. That was it. No alarm sounded. No flashing lights. Just silence and a confirmation. 50 miles away, inside DHS's Northern Virginia facility, a red flag pinged across the secure monitoring system. A case file marked as low-level personal tracking had just escalated to Tier 1 priority. The name Arlo T. appeared in the automated scan, linked to an ongoing high-level prosecution. The breach included external circulation. The metadata showed at least 4 unique IP addresses had accessed the document in the past hour. 2 from personal devices, 1 from a legal firm, and 1 from a VPN endpoint traced to Fairfax County's court network. The system did what it was designed to do. It triggered the chain. By 6:47 p.m., the DHS response unit had been alerted. A field team was mobilized. Their destination, Oak Hill Road. A supervisor reviewed the voice memo I'd recorded. She tapped through the document logs. Timestamped. Geotagged. Labeled correctly. She clicked on the journal excerpt I'd uploaded earlier. Her notes read, "Witness protection compromised. Subject followed protocol. Family breach chain. Initiate retrieval." Back in the house, I stood at my window, peeking through the blinds. Downstairs, laughter floated up like perfume. I could hear Isolde's voice, snarky and light. She's always been dramatic. Honestly, it's like she writes so people will feel bad for her. Someone clinked a glass. "Callan, didn't you say she once wrote she felt like the walls had teeth?" More laughter. Vera's voice followed, airy and unbothered. "Well, maybe now someone will finally read what she has to say." I closed the curtain and sat on the edge of the bed. My suitcase was still open. The journal, half buried in clothes. The page with Arlo's name was gone, already shredded and flushed. But it didn't matter now. The damage was done. Not by me. By them. I pulled my emergency phone closer. Checked the time. 7:06 p.m. Then, faint in the distance, I heard it. Engines. Not just one. Not the slow, steady rhythm of a neighbor's sedan or the bass of Callan's truck. These were sharp, coordinated, approaching fast. I looked outside again. Black SUVs. 3 of them. No sirens. Just motion, efficient and unrelenting, pulling into our driveway like they'd rehearsed it. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just stood there, watching it all unfold. Because they thought they were untouchable. But even family has limits. Especially when they choose cruelty. The engine sounds faded as they parked. Tires pressed against gravel with purpose, not urgency. Controlled. Like they'd done this before. Because they had. Probably dozens of times. But never here, not on this quiet cul-de-sac lined with hydrangeas and mailboxes shaped like eagles. I stayed by the window, hidden behind the curtain, just enough to watch without being seen. 3 black SUVs. Matte finish. No markings. No need for them. The silence was heavier than any siren could have been. Downstairs, laughter. Isolde was in the middle of a story. Something about a patient who thought she was psychic, delivered with the same smug cadence she reserved for holiday wine tastings and TED Talks. Leora poured another round of sangria. Gideon held court near the fireplace, gesturing with an empty glass like a self-made prophet. And Mom, Vera, was smiling wide, her voice rising above the rest. So then I said, well, maybe if she spent more time with real people instead of scribbling in that notebook, she wouldn't be so paranoid. And they just lost it. I mean, really, can you blame them? More laughter. Dad sat in his recliner, head tilted as if watching them from a distance, though his body was right there. Then 3 loud knocks. Not a doorbell. Not a neighbor's knock. A kind of knocking that carried authority in every strike. They stopped mid-sentence. Vera froze, holding a bowl of mixed nuts. Isolde blinked. Did you invite someone else? Gideon turned toward the front door. Probably just a delivery. Don't answer that, Vera said, adjusting her blouse collar. It's probably more guests. Then through the door. Federal agents. Step away from the entrance. The silence that followed was instant and unforgiving. I stepped out of my room, walked slowly down the hall, reached the top of the stairs as Callan opened the door. And the night shifted. The agents moved fast, for came through the doorway, another 2 circled around to the back. All dressed in tactical uniforms, black, clean, no names on the front. Just DHS stitched in stark white over their chests. Ellis Mitchell, Vera Mitchell, Isolde Mitchell, Callan Mitchell, Gideon West. One agent called out. Step forward, hands where we can see them. Mom dropped the bowl. Pecans scattered across the hardwood. Dad stood slowly, confusion wrinkling his forehead. What is this? Step forward, the agent repeated. You are not under arrest at this moment, but this is a federal order of detainment pending a security breach investigation. Isolde's face drained of color. There's a mistake. This must be a mistake. One of the agents scanned the room. His gaze landed on me, calm but sharp. Are you the reporting party? Yes. Everything slowed. Callan lifted his hands. Hold on. What the hell is going on? Gideon tried to speak. I'm a lawyer. No sudden moves, the lead agent snapped. Face down, hands on the floor. Face down. Vera gasped. We're her family. We didn't mean any harm. You distributed protected information across unsecured platforms, the agent said, voice like glass. That's a felony under Federal Statute 18 U.S.C. Section 798. You've got to be kidding me, Gideon muttered, even as he slowly knelt. One by one, they followed commands. On the floor, hands visible, the rug beneath them crumpled under their weight. Isolde whispered, she really did it, and I stood at the bottom of the stairs, watching. Another agent approached me. Ma'am, do you want to be escorted from the property? I shook my head. No, I want to stay. He nodded once, stepped back. The next 10 minutes were a blur of commands and compliance. Phones were confiscated. The laptop from the dining room was zipped into a black case. Leora tried to speak. One of the agents asked her if she had accessed the journal file. She admitted she had. Her voice trembled. Amira came down the stairs holding a stuffed animal, her wide eyes searching for someone to tell her what was happening. Mom, she whispered. Why are they on the floor? Leora reached for her, but the agent gestured. Please don't move until we finish processing. I walked toward Amira, knelt, and held out my hand. Come here, honey. She came, sat in my lap. The weight of her body felt like the only real thing in the room. One of the agents turned to Vera. You emailed the document titled Niall's Mind Journal to multiple recipients outside the original thread, correct? Vera, still on the floor, said nothing. I just sent it to a few people in the family, she finally mumbled. It's not like I posted it on the internet. Intent is not a shield, the agent replied flatly. Your distribution included references to an active federal witness. That file is now classified. Callan lifted his head, voice cracking. I only sent a screenshot. 1 page. I didn't know what it meant. Another agent spoke, quieter but with more weight. That one screenshot contained a pseudonym tied to a witness currently under protection. That alone could have compromised operations. People could have died. Callan's face turned gray. Isolde said, no one told us. How were we supposed to know? Because she did, the lead agent replied, pointing at me. Multiple times. You ignored her warnings. Vera finally looked at me, really looked. You really did this, she said, as if the words surprised her. I looked her in the eye. You really let it happen. No one argued after that. When the initial detainments were completed, 2 agents began ushering my family members toward the vehicles parked out front. They didn't resist. Their pride was gone now, flattened beneath the reality of what they had done. Ellis, my father, paused in the doorway. He looked back at me, not with anger, not with grief, just disbelief. You called them on your own family, he said softly. I stared back. No. I told you to stop. You chose not to. He opened his mouth as if to say more, then closed it again. Outside, the agents placed each of them in separate vehicles. No handcuffs yet, just protocol. Even then, it was more mercy than they deserved. A younger officer stood near me and asked again if I'd like to leave. I shook my head once. No, I said. I want them to see me watching. The street was quiet again. The black SUVs had pulled away, slow and deliberate, leaving behind tire marks and the heavy scent of burned rubber and finality. I stood on the front lawn long after the taillights disappeared, the porch light buzzing faintly behind me. That's when the murmurs started. At first, just whispers from the edge of the driveway. Then footsteps approaching, cautious but firm. You didn't have to go that far. The voice came from my Uncle Raymond, Dad's older brother. He wore the same denim jacket he always did, the one with the elbow patches and the permanent smell of pipe smoke. He looked at me like I had personally rearranged the universe just to ruin his evening. I said nothing. Aunt Margie stepped up beside him, arms crossed. This was family. You threw them to the wolves. Do you even realize what you've done? Another cousin muttered from behind the hedge. The damage. They weren't yelling. That would have been easier, almost cleaner. They were calm, offended in that southern way where words like sweetheart came right before a knife in the back. Someone else, was it my godmother, said, They might not be perfect, but they're your people. I turned toward the porch, the weight of their judgment pressing against my spine. I walked past them all without a word. If I had spoken, I might have screamed, and I wasn't going to give them that. Inside, the house was still. Someone had turned off the music. The plates from dinner were still on the table, and someone had knocked over a glass of red wine that was slowly bleeding into Mom's floral table runner. I took the stairs 2 at a time. When I reached the top, I paused, hand on the doorknob of the bedroom that used to be mine. The hallway behind me echoed faintly with muffled voices, more blame, more disbelief. I stepped inside and closed the door. The room hadn't changed. Same cream walls, same framed diploma, same scent of lavender and dust. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. It hadn't in a long time. I walked over to the suitcase, still open, and pulled the journal from beneath a sweater. The page I had replaced, the one with Arlo's name, was gone now. But I flipped to the back anyway, pulled out a pen and started writing. Today, they stopped laughing. But not because they understood. I stared at the words. For a second, I thought I might cry, but nothing came. Not even a sting in my eyes. Just quiet. I closed the book gently. That would be the last thing I'd ever write in it. I left it on the bed. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Voicemail. From Vera. I didn't need to listen. I knew the tone already. Still, I pressed play. You were always dramatic, her voice said, sharper than glass. You never learned how to forgive. You'll die alone in a room full of notebooks, and no one will care what you wrote. She ended the message with a sigh, more disappointed than angry. That was her specialty, weaponized disappointment. I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. I didn't save it for proof, or playback, or closure. I just let it vanish. That voice didn't get to live in my head anymore. I sat in silence for a while. The air felt heavy, but my chest didn't. Not like before. Then I saw it. Something tucked under the pillow on the other side of the bed. A folded piece of paper, crinkled at the edges. I reached for it, unfolded it slowly. Crayon, blue and green. Dear Koot, it began. I think your brain is very smart. I like your journal. Mommy said not to write this, but I wanted to. Signed, Amira, with a smiling sun and a crooked heart. I read it 3 times before I let myself smile. That letter didn't ask for anything. It didn't try to justify. It didn't accuse. It simply said, I see you. And somehow, that was more than anyone else in the entire house had managed in 34 years. I placed the letter inside my journal, zipped it into the side pocket of my suitcase, and stood. I looked around the room once more. The photos, the books, the outdated curtains, the invisible weight of everything unsaid. Then I picked up my bag and walked out without looking back. The courthouse was quiet in the way hospitals are before dawn. Everything was clean, orderly, and faintly humming with fluorescent light. I sat at the far end of the bench in courtroom 2B, my hands clasped in my lap. No family in the gallery. No texts asking how I was doing. No lawyer explaining what to expect. Just me, sitting in a chair that creaked every time I shifted my weight, staring at a judge who hadn't yet looked up from her files. I wasn't on trial, not legally. But this wasn't vindication either. This was process. Federal process. And like most government things, it was slow, uncomfortable, and colder than it needed to be. The hearing was scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. At 9:03, the door in the back of the courtroom opened with a whisper. Harold. He wore the same worn navy blazer he always did when he drove me to secure sites. He held his hat in his hand, like it was church. No words, just a nod, and he took the last seat in the back row. That was it. Just him. And yet, in that moment, it was everything. The judge finally looked up. Let's begin. A DHS representative, Agent Miller, stood. Calm, clipped, efficient. Ms. Niall Mitchell submitted a breach report on June 12th. Internal investigation confirmed she followed appropriate security protocols prior to the incident. Unauthorized access and distribution of classified information were committed by individuals without clearance, all of whom have been processed under preliminary administrative actions. Criminal proceedings are pending in parallel jurisdictions. He continued, but I only heard fragments. Keywords: compliant, whistleblower, security safeguard. Then they presented the evidence. My voice recording, the internal email logs, and finally the journal. I didn't expect them to read from it, but they did. Agent Miller opened to the final page. Your Honor, this is the line we'd like to enter into record, Exhibit B, used as the timestamp for breach awareness and whistleblower protocol activation. He read aloud, If no one believes me, at least this journal holds the truth. There was a silence after that, not the kind that asked for applause, the kind that held space for something difficult. The judge looked at me. You're not asking for restitution? I shook my head. No statement, she asked. I've said everything I needed to say, I replied. She nodded. Then this matter, from the DHS side, is closed. You're dismissed, Ms. Mitchell. I stood. My knees didn't shake. I walked out, past Harold, who didn't stand but did place one hand over his heart for a moment. I nodded back. I didn't need him to speak. That gesture said more than anything words could offer. That night, I was back in the temporary apartment the agency had set me up with. 1 bedroom, beige walls, nothing personal yet, but safe, quiet. I turned on the lamp beside the bed and checked my phone. 1 missed call. Blocked number. I played the voicemail. Niall, it's Callan. His voice was thinner than I remembered. Scratchy. He sounded like someone who just finished crying, or maybe someone who hadn't slept much. I didn't get it. I didn't get how bad it was, until they made me sit in that room, until someone explained what could have happened because of what I did. He exhaled slowly, then kept going. I'm not calling to beg. I know I don't deserve that. I just wanted to say I don't think you're crazy anymore. I think you were the only one paying attention. Pause. I'm sorry. For real. Then the line cut off. I didn't save the message. I didn't delete it either. I just let it sit there in the inbox, like a stone on a grave. A week later, I was relocated. Different city, different air, fewer trees, more sky. The office was smaller than my last post, tighter security, less small talk. That suited me just fine. I set up my desk slowly, one item at a time. The encrypted laptop, the badge, the keypad access folder, and finally, a small frame with a single printed line centered in black serif type. If no one believes me, at least this journal holds the truth. I placed it on the corner of the desk where the sun would catch it in the afternoon. No photos of family, no childhood mementos, no reminders of a house with the creaking stairs and the perfectly sliced fruit trays. But I did have something else. A new journal. Blank. Offline. Locked inside a drawer I held the only key to. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, looking out at a skyline I didn't recognize yet. The city buzzed beyond the window. Somewhere, people were laughing, having dinner, arguing, living. I thought about Amira, about the crayon note tucked carefully in my luggage, about Harold, about the voicemail I hadn't replayed, about the silence that used to feel like abandonment and now felt like protection. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I didn't feel invisible. I felt real. I didn't win. That's not what this was. There were no trophies, no press releases. But I'd survived. I told the truth. And even if they still painted me as the villain in whispered phone calls and passive-aggressive family group chats, I knew what I'd done was right.